The city was a monument to noise, a sprawling, cacophonous beast that never slept. My apartment, a shoebox suspended over a perpetually honking street, was a cage. I was a librarian, an archivist of forgotten knowledge, and my world was a symphony of rustling pages and whispered thoughts. But the city's relentless clamor was a constant assault on my fragile peace. My life had become a series of migraines and desperate attempts to find a quiet corner in a world that refused to be silent. The only solace I found was in my work, in the hushed, cavernous halls of the university's special collections, where the silence was not an absence, but a presence. My name is Elias, and I am an archivist. My passion, my obsession, was the Whisper Index, a collection of journals, letters, and ephemera from the university's earliest days. It was a chaotic, disorganized mess, a forgotten corner of the library that no one had touched in decades. I was the one who had unearthed it, a treasure trove of forgotten voices, and I was determined to bring order to its chaos. The Whisper Index was not a single collection, but a disparate assortment of writings from various students, professors, and staff from the university's early years. The common thread, the reason for the name I had given it, was the recurring mention of a shared experience, a profound, unsettling silence that would descend upon the campus, followed by a faint, melodic hum. The first entry that caught my attention was a diary from a student named Eleanor Vance, dated 1908. Her handwriting was neat and precise, a mirror of her methodical mind. "The silence fell today," she wrote. "Not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. It was a weight, a pressure on the air. Then the hum, a beautiful, perfect note that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I felt a sense of peace, a feeling of coming home." Her entries continued, each one documenting the hum's return, its growing intensity, and her own increasing obsession with it. Her final entry was a single, cryptic phrase: "The silence calls to them, it calls them home." I dismissed it as the ramblings of a young woman driven mad by solitude and the pressures of her studies, but the unsettling feeling lingered. I found myself poring over the Whisper Index, my obsession growing with each cryptic entry. I found a pattern. The strange entries, the rambling thoughts, the mention of the hum, they all began during periods of profound silence on campus. The writers, men and women, whose lives were defined by routine and predictability, had all succumbed to a shared madness. But what if it wasn't madness? What if they had simply started to hear what was always there, waiting in the silence? My paranoia grew. The library, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The automated climate control system, once so reliable, started to fail. The air pressure sensors would report impossible readings. The automated lighting would shut down for no reason, and the emergency backup generator would flicker and die for a second, then restart as if nothing had happened. I was in the Whisper Index room, surrounded by the forgotten voices of the past, when I heard it for the first time. The silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a physical force, a heavy, suffocating pressure that made my ears pop. Then the hum, a low, ethereal sound, a perfect melodic note that seemed to vibrate in my bones. It was a beautiful, haunting song, a promise of peace, a perfect silence. I stumbled back from the bookshelf, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, a figment of my imagination, a consequence of the loneliness that was finally getting to me. But I knew better. I had heard it. It was real. I was trapped in a soundless world, and the hum was a siren's call, pulling me in. I could hear a low, rhythmic thudding now, a pounding that came from the depths of the library's basement, as if something was beating on the bottom of the building. A major storm hit that night, the wind howling like a banshee, and the rain lashing against the windows. The city's power went out at midnight. Not a full blackout, just a flicker, a momentary dimming of the whole world. The automated lighting in the library died, and the emergency generator failed to kick in. The library was plunged into darkness. I was in the Whisper Index room, clutching Eleanor Vance's diary, when I heard it, a low raspy sigh, a voice that was too close, too real. "You're not supposed to be in here." I knew it was here. It was inside the library. I scrambled to the main door, but it was sealed shut, the old iron lock, as cold and unyielding as a tombstone. I was trapped. I ran up the spiral staircase, my lungs burning, the thudding sound from the basement getting faster, harder. The storm raged outside, but the real storm was inside. In the silence that wasn't silent at all, the voice came again. This time from the reading room. The silence calls them. It calls them home. I reached the top of the stairs and burst into the reading room. The enormous, cavernous space was dark. I had to get the lights working. The automated system was completely down, but there was an old manual crank, a relic from a bygone era, that could still operate the chandelier. I fumbled for it in the dark, my hands shaking. I had to get the light back on. I had to. The light was the only thing that kept the darkness at bay. The hum returned, and a low, ethereal voice answered it from the silence. It was a beautiful, haunting song, a perfect melody that seemed to seep into my bones, promising peace, a perfect silence. I started cranking the handle, my muscles screaming in protest, and the chandelier slowly, sluggishly began to rise. The light pierced the darkness, a powerful, brilliant sword of light that cut through the silence. The creature was there, in the middle of the room, its glowing red eyes fixed on me. It was long and slender, its skin a pearlescent white, and its movements were graceful, hypnotic. It wasn't menacing, it was lonely. Its eyes held an ocean of sorrow, a profound sadness that I recognized. It wasn't a monster, it was a mirror. It was what I had become. The voice came again, a whisper inside my head, a thought that wasn't my own. "Don't look for us. We're still listening to the music." The words from the note in Eleanor Vance's diary, the words of the previous archivists. It was then that I realized the previous archivists weren't driven mad by the isolation. They were driven mad by the knowledge that they weren't alone, that the library, their purpose, was a beacon for something else, something ancient, something lonely, something that had been waiting for a kindred spirit. The silence called to them. It called to me. The creature in the reading room was a manifestation of my own loneliness, a physical embodiment of the sorrow that had been consuming me. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to connect with me. It was a shared sorrow, a profound, beautiful, and haunting melody that was finally letting me feel something again. I stopped cranking the handle, and the chandelier died. The creature in the reading room was gone, but the hum, the beautiful, haunting song, was still there, inside my head. The voice came again, this time a gentle, calming whisper. "You're not alone. You never were." The next morning, the storm was gone. The sun was shining, and the city's noise returned. The Whisper Index sat open on my desk, its pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. The entries documented the mundane, academic debates, notes on lectures, gossip about faculty. It was a record of routine, a testament to a life of predictable solitude. I picked up the pen, and for the first time in months, I felt my hands, my own hands. I started writing, Not about the weather or the light. I wrote about the hymn, about the song in the silence, about the creature with the glowing red eyes. My handwriting, once so precise, became erratic. The words no longer documenting archival notes, but my internal state. The city is watching, I wrote. The quiet is not empty, it's listening. I've been here for months now, and the solitude is no longer a blanket. It's a presence. It's a partner. The automated systems still fail. The digital archives glitch, and the security system still resets itself at random times. But I don't try to fix them anymore. I just listen. I listen for the hum in the silence, for the song in the noise. The library is no longer a beacon for knowledge. It's a beacon for something else. Something ancient, something lonely, something that had been waiting for a kindred spirit, and I am its archivist. I am not a prisoner, I am a willing participant. I have found the peace I was looking for, but it's not what I expected. The knowledge, the purpose, was never to save the books from the dust. It was to save the lonely from the noise, and I was never alone. I was just waiting for the right call. The last call, and I answered it. I never wanted to get into pet sitting. My entire life, I'd been a dog person, a cat person, a parrot person, any kind of animal person you could name. I felt a connection to them. I rarely felt with humans. Animals didn't lie. They didn't pretend. Their affection was earned, and their disdain was honest. But my last experience as a pet sitter 2 years ago almost broke me. It was for a friend of my mom's, a golden retriever named Mac. He was a sweet old dog, but he had a strange habit of staring at the corner of the living room, sometimes for minutes at a time, his tail barely wagging. One night I saw something in the corner, a shadow that didn't move like a shadow should. It just stayed there. Max whimpered, and I swear I saw the shadow lift its head. It was probably a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination, but it was enough to make me stop pet sitting. I was 22, working part-time at a local library, and trying to save up for my final year of college. The money was a trickle, and my bills were starting to pile up. I'd been living alone since my grandmother passed away, and the silence of her apartment was suffocating. So when I saw a pet sitting request on a local neighborhood app for a single night, $100 cash, my desperation was louder than my dread. I accepted the offer. The address was on the far edge of town. The house itself was a sprawling 2-story colonial with a dark gray exterior and a porch that wrapped around the front. A single motion-activated light flickered as I pulled into the driveway. A woman, in her late 40s, Catherine, opened the door. She had a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Our cat's name is Jasper," she said in a low monotone. "He's an indoor cat, and he's very shy. He'll probably hide for most of the night. He's already eaten, and his litter box is in the laundry room. Just don't let him out." The way she said it made it feel like a warning. I noticed the profound silence of the house. No music, no television, no hum of a refrigerator. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a sterile museum. "I just have one rule," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't go into the spare bedroom on the second floor. It's my husband's home office, and he's very particular about it. It's locked anyway, so you don't have to worry about it." I nodded, my heart pounding. Another locked door, another strange request. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Catherine handed me the keys and the cash, a crisp $100 bill. "We should be back around 5 in the morning," she said, and then she left. I was alone in the silent, cold house. I tried to get comfortable, but it was impossible. The silence was too perfect. I kept looking for Jasper, but he was nowhere to be found. Around 11 p.m., I heard a faint, rhythmic scratching sound from the second floor. It was coming from the spare bedroom, the one that was supposed to be locked. I crept up the stairs and stood in front of the door. The scratching stopped, and a faint whisper came from inside. "You're not Catherine." I jumped back, my hand flying to my mouth. Had I imagined it? The sound returned, now a slow, deliberate tapping, like someone was trying to spell something out. Tap, 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 tap. It was coming from the attic, directly above the spare bedroom. The house wasn't just silent, it was holding its breath. I had to see. The door to the spare bedroom was ajar. I pushed it open and saw a small metal cage in the corner. Inside, a pair of glowing green eyes stared back at me. It wasn't a cat. It was a small, emaciated bird, its feathers dull and ragged. It was scratching at the bars with its beak. The whisper came again, this time from the room itself. "They just want me to be a good boy." I ran back downstairs, grabbed my phone, and texted my friend to call me in 20 minutes. They couldn't call the police. What was I going to say? That a trapped bird was talking to me? I heard a slow, dragging sound from the second floor, and then from the stairs. Drag, drag, drag. It was coming closer. I grabbed my bag, sprinted out the door, and didn't look back. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The motion-activated light flickered, and for a second I saw a figure standing in the doorway. Not Catherine. A man, tall, gaunt, his face a blur of shadow. He was just standing there, watching me leave. I never took another pet sitting job again. 2 days later, I saw a post on a local neighborhood forum. "Have you seen this cat?" The picture was blurry, but I recognized the name, Jasper. The description said he had been missing for over 3 years, and that's when I finally understood. The family didn't have a cat. They had a secret. The silence of that house, the locked door, the desperate scratching. It wasn't a cage for a bird. It was a cage for a secret. And sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't the monster you see, but the one you don't. I never knew my father's side of the family. He left when I was 10, and my mom never spoke of him. When I was 16, I found an old photo album in the attic, filled with pictures of a smiling man with my father's eyes, surrounded by a large, happy family. They were all strangers to me. When I confronted my mom about it, she just shook her head. "Some things are better left alone," she said. Life went on. I became a graphic designer, but those pictures never left me. I was 25 and felt like half of my story was missing, so I used a genealogy website and found a cousin, Sarah, who lived just 2 hours away. We talked for hours, and I learned about my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, and a cousin my age, named Jacob. Sarah told me Jacob had always been different, not with malice, but with a kind of weary resignation. A month later, Sarah invited me to a family reunion at the old family home, a huge, sprawling Victorian house on a lake. She said everyone would be there, even Jacob. I was nervous, but excited. This was my chance to finally meet the other half of me. I arrived on a Friday afternoon. The house was beautiful, and the air was filled with the smell of barbecue and the sound of laughter. Sarah met me at the door with a hug. She introduced me to my grandparents, who hugged me like a long-lost child. It was overwhelming, but as the evening wore on, I noticed something strange. There was a large old shed at the back of the property, 100 feet from the house, and the door was padlocked. I saw one of my uncles, a tall, stern-looking man named Richard, go out to the shed and stand there for a few moments, his face a mask of worry. He didn't go in. He just stared at the door. Later that night, my grandmother, with a tired sigh, said, "Jacob's doing okay." No one responded. Just a collective, knowing sigh. I was stuck on it. Who was Jacob, and why did everyone look so sad when his name was mentioned? The next day, the atmosphere was different. The laughter was more strained. I saw Richard go to the shed again, this time with a tray of food. He unlocked the door, went inside, and came out a few minutes later, locking the door behind him. I remembered Sarah's words. "He's always been different." I tried to ask her about it, but she just shook her head. "It's just a family thing," she said. That night I couldn't sleep. The moon was full. I looked out my window and saw a figure standing by the shed, a shadow in the moonlight. He was motionless. As I watched, the figure slowly turned its head, and I saw a flash of pale, luminous eyes staring directly at me. I ducked, my heart pounding. I waited for 10 minutes, then looked out again. The figure was gone, but I heard a faint tapping sound from the wall next to my bed. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded like someone was trying to spell something out. The next morning, I confronted Sarah. "Who is Jacob?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What's in that shed?" "Jacob isn't a person," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "He's a thing, a presence. He's been in our family for generations. They keep him locked up. He's the reason my father left. He's the reason so many of us are so tired." "What does it want?" I asked, the words barely a whisper. "It wants to be free," she said, "and it wants a family." That night, I just lay there, listening. I heard the tapping again, this time from the hallway outside my door. It was faster now, more frantic. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded like a call, a desperate plea. The next morning, I left. I just packed my bags and drove away, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the steering wheel. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a reflection of the man from the photo album. My father. In the reflection, he looked old, his eyes filled with a terror that made my blood run cold. And then, superimposed over his face, I saw the same pale, luminous eyes I had seen outside the shed. They were my eyes, and for the first time, I felt a part of my family I never wanted to be. I never went back. I never told anyone about what I saw, because sometimes the secrets we keep aren't in a shed or an attic. Sometimes they're in our blood, and sometimes they're just waiting for us to come home. You don't get to choose your family or the stories they tell. You just get to live with them. My entire life, I've been a night person. The night felt like a secret I was a part of, a time when the world held its breath and its real face showed. But one summer, that secret turned into a nightmare. I was 21, a university student studying art history, and Brooke, my roommate Sarah, told me about a job opening at her coffee shop, just a few hours a night cleaning up after they closed. It was a simple job, and it paid enough to keep me in ramen and textbooks. The coffee shop was an old building, a renovated mill that sat by the river. At night, when the last customer had left and the doors were locked, it was different. The silence was heavy, the shadows were long, and the old building seemed to sigh and settle in on itself. My job was simple. I had to mop the floors, wipe down the tables, and take out the trash. But one night, the second week into my new job, something felt off. The air was colder, the silence was deeper, and I had the distinct, unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone. I was in the back room when I heard it, a faint tapping sound from the old wooden door that led to the basement. Tap, 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 tap. I froze, my heart pounding. I knew I was alone. Sarah had been the last one to leave, and she had locked the door behind her. I stood there holding my breath, and the tapping stopped. I tried to rationalize it. A rat, a loose pipe. But as I walked back into the main room, I saw one of the huge windows that looked out onto the river was slightly ajar. I had seen Sarah lock it. I walked over and pushed it closed, the click of the lock echoing in the quiet room. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a faint, high-pitched scratching sound from the floorboards in the center of the room. It was a rhythmic, almost deliberate scratching. I looked down and saw nothing, but the sound was still there, coming from beneath me, from the basement. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I wanted to run, to get out of there as fast as I could, but I was rational. I was in a well-lit, public place. There was nothing to be afraid of. I walked toward the door that led to the basement. It was old, dusty, and had a small circular window. I peered through it. The basement was a black pit of shadows and dust, but I saw something move in the corner. A faint yellowish light flickered, and for a second I saw a pair of glowing green eyes staring back at me. They were small, almost cat-like, but they had a human intelligence behind them. They were watching me. I jumped back, my hand flying to my mouth. It was too much. The scratching, the open window, the eyes in the dark. I turned and ran, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. I just ran and ran and ran until I was out in the street, my lungs burning, my heart pounding against my ribs. I ran all the way home. The next day, I called Sarah and told her I was sick. A few days later, she texted me, "Did you hear what happened to the coffee shop?" My blood ran cold. A week later, a news report confirmed the coffee shop had been closed for good. The police were investigating a series of break-ins, but nothing was ever stolen. They found strange scratch marks on the floorboards and a single human-sized cage in the basement, its door ajar. I never told anyone what I saw. Not Sarah, not my parents, not the police. What was I going to say? I saw glowing eyes in the dark, and they were watching me. No one would believe me, so I kept my secret, and I stopped staying up late. The night wasn't a friend anymore. It was a monster, and it was waiting for me. Some places have memories, a dark, ugly memory that clings to the walls, to the floorboards, to the very air itself. Maybe the building was haunted, but I realized, as I lay awake at night, that the one truly haunted was me. Growing up, my grandmother always had a collection of antique dolls. They were all porcelain, with painted faces and glass eyes that seemed to follow you. I hated them. They were silent, unblinking, and they always gave me the feeling that they were watching me. My grandmother would tell me they were a family heirloom, and that I should never ever move them. They liked their places, she would whisper. You don't want to upset them. I never asked what would happen if I did. I was 28, a freelance graphic designer, and I had just inherited my grandmother's old house. It was a beautiful Victorian, filled with memories and secrets and dolls. So many dolls. They were a silent, unblinking army, and they were all staring at me. I tried to get rid of them. I boxed them up, put them in the garage, and even listed a few on a local antique website. But every time I went to the garage, I would find one of the dolls on the floor, its glass eyes staring up at me, its porcelain face cracked with a faint smile, and the listings, they would be deleted from the website, a cryptic message left in their place. You can't sell what isn't yours. The fear was back, cold and sharp. I finally gave up. I put the dolls back in their places, in the same spots my grandmother had left them. I felt a sense of relief, a quiet stillness that I hadn't felt since I moved in. I was finally at peace, or so I thought. One night, I was working late when I heard a sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the living room. Tap, 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 tap. I knew I was alone. I crept the living room door and peered inside. The room was dark, but a faint yellowish light flickered from the corner where the largest of the dolls, a porcelain beauty named Isabella, sat. Her glass eyes seemed to be glowing, a faint, sickly green. I saw her hand move, just a twitch, and then another tapping sound from the old grandfather clock. The tapping was coming from everywhere. It was a cacophony of quiet, a symphony of dread. I backed away slowly, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't explain what I was seeing. A collection of inanimate objects was communicating. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but the fear was real. The fear was a living thing. I decided to go upstairs, to get away from the dolls. As I walked up the stairs, I heard a sound from behind me, a slow, deliberate dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I didn't look back. I just ran, my feet pounding on the wooden stairs. I reached my room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I sat on my bed, listening. The dragging stopped at my door, and then a faint, childlike whisper. "You moved us. You upset us." The voice was soft, melodic, like a child's. I couldn't stay. The dread was suffocating. I grabbed my bag and ran out the door, down the stairs, and into the night. I fumbled for my car keys, started the engine, and drove away. As I drove, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The motion-activated light on the front porch flickered, and for a second, I saw a figure standing in the doorway. Not a person, a doll, Isabella. Her face was a blur of shadow, her glass eyes glowing a faint green. She was just standing there, watching me leave. I never went back, but the dolls, they came with me. One by one, I found them in my new apartment, on my bookshelves, in my closets, on my nightstand, each one with a new, faint crack on its face. They were in their places. I can still hear the tapping sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet. The dolls weren't just a part of my grandmother's legacy. They were a part of me, and I could never escape them. I've always been a creature of habit. My mornings are the same. Coffee, a run, and a quick check of the news. My nights are the same. A cup of tea, a book, and a movie. I find comfort in the routine, in the predictable rhythm of my life. It's a safe, quiet world where nothing bad ever happens. But one summer, my predictable world was shattered by a single simple and utterly terrifying word. I was 27, a software developer, and I had just moved into a new apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The apartment was a tiny, one-bedroom unit on the second floor of an old, 3-story building. It was perfect for me. The neighbors were all friendly, and the landlord, an old man named Mr. Henderson, was a kind, gentle soul. A week after I moved in, Mr. Henderson knocked on my door. "I'm sorry to bother you, son," he said, "but I have a bit of an odd request. My daughter is visiting for the weekend, and she's a bit of a night owl. She likes to read in the dark. She asked me if I could turn off the light on the first floor landing. It shines right into her bedroom window." He looked at me, a pleading look in his eyes. "Would you mind, just for the weekend?" I smiled. It wasn't a strange request at all. I told him I didn't mind. I never used the stairs anyway. I always took the elevator. He thanked me profusely and left. That night, as I was walking back from my run, I noticed the light on the first floor landing was off. The hallway was a dark, long tunnel of shadows, but I told myself it was just a coincidence, nothing to be afraid of. The next morning, I saw Mr. Henderson. "Thank you so much," he said, his face a wide, grateful smile. My daughter said she slept like a baby. She sends her thanks. I smiled back, feeling good about my small act of kindness. That night, the silence was different. It was deeper, heavier. I was in my living room, watching a movie, when I heard a faint, high-pitched scratching sound from the first floor landing. It was a rhythmic, almost deliberate scratching. I froze, my heart pounding. I knew I was alone on my floor. I crept to my front door and peered through the peephole. The hallway was a black pit of shadows, but I saw something move. A faint, yellowish light flickered, and for a second, I saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring directly at me. They were small, almost cat-like, but they had a human intelligence behind them. They were watching me. I jumped back, my hand flying to my mouth. I couldn't explain it. A strange, inhuman presence in the dark on the first floor landing. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but the fear was real. I decided to call Mr. Henderson. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice a low, sleepy rumble. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice a whisper. I think someone is in the building. I saw something." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Son," he said, and his voice was no longer gentle. It was cold and flat and full of a quiet, ancient dread. "I don't have a daughter."
I dropped the phone, my mind reeling. I was a rational person, a software developer, but I was hearing a sound, and I was seeing a light, and I was hearing a voice that was telling me a lie.
I grabbed my bag, opened my front door, and ran, not down the stairs, but towards the fire escape at the end of the hallway. I fumbled with the latch, my hands slick with sweat, and scrambled down the metal stairs, my feet slipping on the rungs. I didn't look back. I just ran until I was out in the street, my lungs burning, my heart pounding against my ribs. A week later, I saw a news report. A young woman, a tenant of the building, had been missing for over a month. The police were investigating, but they had no leads. I knew what had happened. She had seen the light, she had heard the scratching, and she had paid the price. I never went back. I never told anyone what Mr. Henderson had said. What was I going to say? My landlord is a liar, and he's hiding a monster in the dark. No one would believe me. So I kept my secret, and I stopped being a creature of habit. The night wasn't a friend anymore. It was a monster, and it was waiting for me. The old man's eyes were the color of faded denim, and just as weary. He sat behind a card table on a lawn that was mostly weeds and dead grass. A small, hand-painted sign propped up on a rusty paint can. Everything must go. $1. A breeze smelling of cut grass and distant rain lifted the corners of the tattered tablecloth, making it flap like a nervous bird. This wasn't the kind of yard sale you see in the suburbs, with neatly labeled boxes and polite chit-chat. This was the end of a story, a final, quiet exhalation. I had been driving aimlessly since my last therapy session, a ritual that had become as much a part of my week as buying groceries. Dr. Thompson said I needed to find a hobby, something to fill the silence that had grown between me and my wife, Sarah. The kind of silence that's not just a lack of sound, but a heavy, tangible thing that weighs down the air. So I drove, and when I saw the sign, I turned, not out of genuine interest, but because the road ahead felt too straight, too predictable. The table held the usual assortment of someone's forgotten life: mismatched silverware, chipped ceramic figures of angels, a stack of old National Geographic magazines with sun-faded covers. But what caught my eye was a small wooden music box nestled amongst the clutter. It wasn't much to look at. The wood was dark, perhaps mahogany, but chipped and scarred. The varnish had worn away in places, and a faint sweet smell, like old cloves and beeswax, clung to it. A brass key with an ornate winding pattern sat next to it, gleaming faintly in the pale sunlight. I picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy, dense, and cold in my palm. The carved figures on the lid were almost indecipherable. Worn down by countless fingers over the years, I could make out two figures, a man and a woman, dancing in what looked like a field of tangled thorns. Their faces were smooth, almost featureless, as if their identities had been eroded by time itself. "You like that one?" the old man said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He hadn't looked up from his newspaper until now. My sister always said it was the best thing he ever gave her. "Eh?" I asked, turning the box over in my hands. The bottom was stamped with a small, faded star. The old man just shrugged. Her husband, a soldier, died in the war. She never played it again after he left. Said it sounded like ghosts dancing. I felt a shiver trace its way up my spine. It was probably just the breeze, I told myself, a trick of the mind. "How much?" $1, he said, not bothering to look at me. "The sign says so." I placed a crumpled dollar bill on the table, picked up the box and the key, and walked back to my car. The old man didn't say thank you. He just folded his newspaper over, his faded denim eyes already looking past me, toward the house he was leaving behind. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just bought a music box. I had bought a memory. Back in my quiet, half-empty house, I placed the music box on the mantelpiece in the living room. It looked out of place, a dark and somber relic in a space that felt too bright and clean. Sarah's influence was still everywhere. In the freshly painted walls, the scent of lavender from a candle she'd left behind, the empty space on the coffee table where a bowl of her favorite candies used to sit. The music box was a foreign object, a small piece of another life dropped into the middle of mine. That evening, I decided to try the key. The mechanism was stiff at first, protesting with a soft grinding sound, but with a gentle twist, it caught. I wound the key a few times, then lifted the lid. The music began. It was a simple, haunting melody, a waltz that was both beautiful and melancholic. It sounded like something played on a wind-up gramophone, the notes slightly distorted, as if they were being broadcast from a long-gone era. I sat on the couch and just listened. The music filled the silence, pushing back against the heavy quiet. It was a comfort. I closed my eyes and imagined the two figures on the lid, twirling slowly, forever trapped in their dance. The first strange thing happened that night. I woke up to the sound of music. It wasn't the waltz from the music box, but a faint, almost inaudible melody coming from the living room. It was a different song, slower, more mournful, a sad lullaby. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The clock on my nightstand read 3:00 a.m. I got up, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The living room was dark. The music box was silent. The faint scent of cloves and old beeswax hung in the air, a phantom perfume. I checked the doors and windows. Everything was locked. I went back to bed, rationalizing it away as a dream, a trick of the mind, but the lullaby, a ghost of a song, lingered in my memory. The second night was worse. I didn't wake up to music. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Soft, measured taps, like someone was dancing on the floorboards in the living room. I lay still, my breath caught in my throat. Tap, tap. I could hear the subtle creak of the floor, the same way it creaked when Sarah used to dance in the living room after a glass of wine, her movements light and joyful. The sound was so similar, so real, that for a moment, I forgot to be afraid. I wanted to call out her name, but I knew it wasn't her. It was something else. I finally mustered the courage to get up and turn on the light. The room was empty. The music box was exactly where I had left it. A single small white rose lay on the floor in front of it, its petals already starting to curl at the edges. The next morning, I threw the music box into a cardboard box and shoved it into the back of my hall closet, out of sight, out of mind. It had to be a trick of the mind, a reaction to the silence and loneliness of my house, but the silence didn't come back. The silence was replaced by something else, a phantom presence. I would be watching TV and feel a cold draft, as if someone had just walked past me. I would be making coffee and swear I saw a shadow in my peripheral vision, a flicker of movement where there should have been none. My cats, usually calm and affectionate, started hissing at the living room door, their backs arched, their fur on end. One evening, I was on the phone with Sarah, trying to have a civil conversation about the final divorce papers. "I just don't understand why you're being so distant," she said, her voice laced with a frustration that felt all too familiar. "It's like you're not even in that house anymore." I couldn't answer, because at that very moment, a soft, deliberate tapping started coming from the closet where I'd hidden the music box. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud enough for Sarah to hear, but it was loud enough for me. It was a quiet, insistent rhythm, like a partner waiting for a dance.
"I have to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I hung up the phone and stood there, staring at the closet door. The tapping stopped. I felt a wave of icy cold wash over me, a physical presence, as if something was standing directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing, but the faint smell of cloves and beeswax filled the room.
That night, I had a dream. I was back in the house, but it was different. It was old, dusty, filled with shrouded furniture. In the center of the room, a man and a woman were dancing. They were silhouettes, their faces turned away from me. The music box was on the floor, open, playing its haunting waltz. As I watched, the woman's silhouette turned slightly, and I saw her face. It was Sarah's. She smiled at me, a sad, knowing smile, and took the man's hand. They danced, slow and deliberate, while I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move. The man's silhouette also turned, and I saw his face. It was mine, a younger, happier version of me, dancing with Sarah. But as I watched them, their movements started to slow, to become stiff and disjointed, like a broken music box. Their faces became worn down and featureless, like the carvings on the lid. I tried to shout, to warn them, to warn myself, but no sound came out. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The house was silent, too silent. I ran to the living room. The music box was back on the mantelpiece, its lid open. The brass key was gone. I stared at the carvings on the lid, at the two featureless figures in the field of thorns. They seemed to have shifted. Now one of them, the man, was reaching out, reaching for me. The silence is back now, but it's a different kind of silence. It's not the empty, lonely quiet that filled my house after Sarah left. It's a charged, expectant silence. The kind of silence that waits. I took the music box back to the same yard sale a few weeks later. The old man was gone, a young woman. His daughter was now selling what was left. I gave her the box, didn't even ask for $1. I just said, "It was my father's. I'd rather not bring it back inside." She nodded, not even looking at it, and tossed it into a cardboard box with some other random things. I felt a rush of relief. I had gotten rid of it. I had closed the door on that particular brand of madness. But that night, I woke up to the sound of music. The lullaby. Faint, but clear. It wasn't coming from the living room. It was coming from inside my head, and the cold draft I felt wasn't from a window. It was in my lungs. Do you ever wonder what happens to the memories people leave behind? Do you ever think that some of them don't want to stay in a box, that they want to find a new home, a new life to haunt, a new person to dance with?